Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. Now, on the screen opposite me, but actually in a completely different country, is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amarim. Hello, Felipe. Tell us where you are and what you're doing.
Hi, bro. Hi, everyone. I'm currently in Spain. How cool is that?
Ooh, nice.
Oh,
What are you
yeah.
doing now? You just taking a break?
Yeah, I'm just taking a break. After months like gigging nonstop, like 7 days a week, I needed a break. So I'm here for 7 days, resting a bit. We've been to this country many times on tour. It's so good to be here on holidays and
It's one of those
not having to travel.
Yeah, it's one of those places where everything is so cheap. Like a beer's cheap, a coffee's only like €1.50. Even the food. I remember when we were on tour, we used to. We always get fed by the venues in the evenings, and in the daytime. Do you remember when we used to drive and stop at the petrol stations? I used to buy a baguette, a pack of chorizo, a pack of cheese, and I just made one long sandwich that would last me for a day, and it cost about €4.
I'm hungry now. Talking about food, but yeah. So, do you know what I got with me? My drink. We always have a drink to start the show, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, because it's too hot in Spain. I got some water.
Oh, right.
Wow,
That's
unbelievable!
natural.
But it's I don't want to let the rock and rollness level go down. So it's on a Jack Daniel's glass.
That's fine. So we compromise, yeah. If the drink's not strong, the glass is.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect.
So how are you doing there, man?
Yeah, good, all good here, man. I've just been really enjoying this album that we're going to do, so let's crack on into it. So Felipe,
I wonder which album's that.
well, Felipe has chosen the album this week, and the album is Aqualung by Jethro Tull, 1971. Felipe, do you want to start by telling us why you chose this album?
Well, because I've got good memories of this album, really, from school. One of my classmates was the guy who introduced me to rock and roll. So I'm going to give a shout out to Dennis, really, really good friend of mine. Haven't seen him in ages, but basically we used to go home after school, either to my place or to his place, and actually listen to albums start to finish.
Wow.
And one of the albums he introduced me was Aqualung, because his dad was a big fan of the band of Jethro Tull, and it was like, you got to listen to these guys, they're great. And then I started going to music shops and buy VHS tapes, so I got this live footage of them. It wasn't the Aqualung tour, but they were obviously playing loads of songs from Aqualung, and Ian Anderson's performance on stage is mind-blowing. It was like running from one side to another, picking up his acoustic guitar and then dropping it, and then picking the flute and playing. It's like he's just insane on stage.
Wow.
And I was like mesmerized by the band's performance and the songs and the whole instrumentation, like the keyboards, drums, bass, guitar, and the occasional violin and and flute. It's very unusual for a rock band. So obviously I have this memory of being a fan of the band, but then the album itself, it's a classic, and it's maybe one of the most remarkable albums in I would say from the 70s at least.
Yeah, well, no, I had to agree with you. I mean, I've had such a great time listening to it. We're going to get more into it, obviously, when we go track by track. But what stood out to me first off was that after having listened to the album first, then you go and look at that Ian Anderson wrote the whole thing. Except the first track where he co-wrote it with his wife, or the second track maybe, but he wrote the whole thing. And as we've seen, we've only done 2 prog bands previously. We did Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Yes. But what I think was important to note with those kind of prog bands was that all the musicians had a part in writing. Whether it was just a solo, whether it was a section or a whole song, they all sort of played their part. Whereas with this is Ian Anderson's album, isn't it?
Yeah, it is his album. And the interesting thing, you just called them prog rock, right? And that's very controversial in a certain way, because Ian Anderson, he kind of mocks the fact that people call them a prog band, because when you actually listen to everything they've done, they have a really, really prog album called Thick as a Brick, which, if I'm not wrong, came out just after Aqualung, and it's a piss take of prog music. Because they did a 45-minute album with one song. Thick as a Brick is the only song in the album.
And that's the piss take that Prog
yes, it is. And they actually did Thick as a Brick too recently. Anyway, it is like, yeah, but it's a piss take in a certain way. It was a beautiful song anyway, loads of parts. And he could, like, it was kind of proven that he could do it and the band was good enough to do that kind of stuff. But he plays so much folk music and classical music. Obviously, prog music is made out of this. And I honestly don't know a better way to describe what they do if it's not prog rock. But maybe, musicians, they don't like that kind of labels. They what we do is unique, whatever. Every musician's a bit like that. So, but I have a controversial opinion on this. If you want to call it a segment,
let's do it. Here is Felipe Unleashed.
God, I'm stealing your segment, isn't it? Anyway, I would say that this album would be almost as good if we only had Ian Anderson's parts in it. Only the guitar, the vocals, and the flute. It would still be a great album.
Interesting. So, sorry, elaborate on that more. If we took out
If you take everything out and just keep the parts recorded by Ian Anderson, it would still be a great album.
That's really interesting, and that's something that actually I've already got, as you guys know now, over the last few episodes, I've done my little end of episode monologue where I tell you what I think about the band or the album. So I've got one prepared, and one thing I mention in it is how it's a compositional masterpiece. I think the songwriting and the composition that he does with the arrangements, even just his parts, like you said, the acoustic guitar, the flute, the vocals, I think it's fantastic. So, do you know what? I'm going to have to go and listen to this album with what you've said in mind, and probably I'll need to go and decipher what he did, and then sort of in my head split it and identify Anderson's parts. But that's not something that initially I would say, oh, hold on, what are you talking about? From you've just said that, and I thought, and I said about Ian Anderson being the whole songwriter. It's hard to disagree with.
Well, it's a fantastic album,
well written.
Yeah, this opinion of mine came out of an experience that I had this morning listening to the album again. Because when I first listened to this album, maybe, 15 years ago, something like that. I've obviously listened to the album many times in my life, but when I first listened to the album, it was all about the guitars and the drums and the bass. I was listening as a musician, as a young musician who was into understanding the instruments and trying to play like those guys. Yeah. So it was like, wow, this is a great band. I wasn't really into the lyrics or the, let's say, the poetic side of the album. And when I've just listened to the album, really just now, again, before we start recording, I was like, wait a minute, it's not as guitar heavy as I thought it was. My initial impression of the album, it's loads of, it's obviously amazing guitar work in the album, but it comes and goes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you simply don't have any electric guitar at all. It's just acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
It's much more acoustic heavy than electric heavy in that sense. Like, you don't have too much, don't have as much heavy riffs as you have of folk guitar playing.
That's true. And flute melodies as well.
And the flute, exactly. Yeah. And some strings in a couple of ballads. And the lyrics are so strong, poetic, and it's stuff sometimes you don't know if he's being really serious on the lyrics. And if you take that approach, they're dark. And if you understand more kind of, if you understand his British sense of humor, then it's more like, it's almost like comedy. But you don't know. You don't really know. It can be dark or it can be funny at the same time.
Yeah, the ambiguity of whether he is taking the piss, doing stuff like Thick as a Brick, or if he's being serious about his religious and, spiritual views,
Yeah.
But yeah, great. So I'll do my little Laz in information thing. So obviously the name of the album is Aqualung. The artist is Jethro Tull, and it was released in March 1971. It was recorded from April 1970 to February 1971 in Island and Morgan Studios in London. So that's a long recording time. I mean, I don't know if they were in and out or if they literally recorded.
Well, can you repeat that exactly from when to when?
Yeah, so April 1970 to February 1971. So that's almost a year.
Interesting.
I I doubt they'd have been in the studio for a year. You know, back.
I doubt either, because there's okay, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, and I was just saying that 43 minutes in length, and the producer, funnily enough, is Ian Anderson and Terry Ellis. So Ian had a huge part in the production as well, which I think was interesting. And generally, labels that come with this album, genres, you know, accredited styles, prog rock, folk rock, and hard rock. They're the three that sort of, when I was doing my research, I found were mentioned most.
Right, interesting.
Yeah.
I like, yeah.
An interesting thing is that there's a debate online that I've seen as to whether or not it's a concept album, because I mean, just from my notes here, I've got that it was a concept album on the distinction between religion and God. Now, do you have anything to say about the lyrics of this?
Yeah, I do have, and I would say, well, so yeah. Quickly talking about the, I would say that I doubt that either the recording process or the or the banding or the time in studio took more than 4 weeks, because that's what Ian Anderson mentions in an interview. There's a kind of deluxe version of the album with a 14-minute interview with him at the end.
So maybe
he mentions he reckons that's the thing, or maybe they used those 4 weeks over the course of a year, but he said they didn't spend more than 4 weeks actually in studio playing, which because there was a high demand for, you know, early 70s, there was a high demand for live performances, and they were obviously making a lot of money out of that. And the label, the promoters, the you know, their agents and themselves, they wanted to be on stage as much as possible. So he reckons it was like they had like 3 or 4 songs kind of ready, and they went to a studio and recorded them, and then they did loads of stuff on the spot, like Locomotive Breath was done on the spot. Like
really?
we hear jamming coming with that. I've some interesting things to say about it. But in regards to being a concept album, difficult to say, because who is in charge of saying that, really? Is it up to the musicians to say, oh, we got this concept album? I mean, guys like Roger Waters, they would say straight to your face, like, no, this is a concept album. If you don't get it, you're wrong. This is a concept album. I had this idea in mind. I think for me, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I didn't think of it as a concept album, but I found at least 2 themes that repeat themselves over the album: poverty and religion.
Interesting.
And that's what I found, because the first 2 songs are clearly about the relation people have with poverty. So not poverty itself. So basically, Ian Anderson said the song Aqualung is about this character Aqualung. Actually, the album cover is the character. It's not a real person, but basically his wife took a picture of this homeless old man, and he said, well, that's going to be like, we're going to make that the album cover. They obviously did something that resembled the guy in the picture. And so there's this, I want to quote him properly, because he said something about Aqualung that I need to find. But basically, he said it's not about, I found it here, yeah. It's really more about our reaction to the homeless, the embarrassment, the sense of hopelessness, of tragedy, of sadness, but also degree of fear, degree of discomfort. We have very mixed emotions in regard to a lot of things about which we could be charitable. So that's his. So it's not about. He said he has never been a homeless guy himself, so he couldn't tell the story under that point of view. So he tells the story under the point of view of someone who is at the same time scared of the homeless guy, but also sad about his situation. So
there's another part as well. Sorry, just about the homeless man, is that I read something about Ian Anderson said about how, whilst he was sad about the homeless man's life, and whilst he felt a certain amount of guilt about him having stuff that the homeless man didn't have, and even what you said about feeling a little scared towards him, he also said that there was also an element of now I'm not going to say jealousy. I'm trying to think of a word. Let's call it spiritual envy, because the homeless man, he's a free spirit, and he doesn't have to conform to the prescribed formats of society. So
Yeah.
because, yeah, you see what I mean? So because he's homeless, there's no rules for him to follow. He doesn't have to pay his taxes because he doesn't earn. He doesn't have to, same sort of thing, pay a rent. He's not held down by bills and all this stuff. And I know
And
that's
schedules
and
and,
schedules. Yeah, I know it's hard. It's so hard to sort of say, oh, let's be envious of that, because I'm sure we all would much rather have a house to live in and pay rent. Whilst rent sucks, at least we've got a home. But there is that free spirit thing of actually saying, listen, whilst I am, or Ian Anderson viewing this guy and saying, listen, whilst he is homeless and whilst this is a tragic thing, he is not tied down by anything. And I wonder if
yeah.
that's a sort of a conversation about modern society versus, I don't know, nature.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow,
you
that's it.
know,
Well, why not?
yeah,
It could be. And it's interesting because he doesn't claim to understand the guy's situation,
no, never,
and not it's just like it's literally just his reaction to someone who has got a complete different lifestyle
yeah.
for whatever tragic reason or for whatever choice the guy made. I don't know. So he doesn't know anything about Aqualung. Aqualung is just that guy, that old man over there. And the character comes back on the second track, which is really interesting.
Yes. Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, so on Cross-Eyed Mary, the second song. So that's again, when I first paid attention to the lyrics, was like, this is quite dark because it's a schoolgirl prostitute.
Yeah,
And I was like, the song is about this girl. And it's like, well, it's a bit dark, isn't it? So she basically, the lyric says something about she gets no kick out of the young boys in the school. She'd rather pay attention to the old men in the streets, especially the homeless guys. So,
yeah.
and Aqualung. So she's into him.
Do you know
She's
what?
into those guys.
Have you ever seen the movie Taxi Driver?
No, I haven't.
With okay, it's the same thing.
I should.
Robert
I
De
know I
Niro.
should have.
It's bloody brilliant. Yeah, Robert De Niro befriends a young, literally, she's Jodie Foster, but she's must be, I don't know how old she's meant to be in the movie, like 15. They befriend each other, and she's a 15-year-old prostitute working the streets of New York or Chicago, wherever it is, and he's a taxi driver. A lot more happens, but I only just thought of that relationship, and that actually, you're right. I did read a bit into that song, and she didn't care for the company of her classmates and her friends. She much rather would hang out with Aqualung.
So exactly. So he goes into that, and she wanted to hang out with the old man, but apparently she doesn't charge any money for that. So the whole thing is she thinks what she's doing is charity, and she's helping them to be happier.
Oh,
So it's his take on that character. So here's the thing: would people nowadays feel comfortable to write such lyrics? You know what I mean?
no,
It's interesting.
you'd be
Well,
cancelled.
you would be cancelled. Yeah, exactly. It's the 70s. And I love the fact that he's not saying anything. It's not an opinion at all. It's just like, I've created these characters and I'm telling their stories. And that there are people like that out there. And those things happen. And it's not a positive or negative take on anything. It's just like, this is reality.
Yeah,
Those things exist and they happen and they are out there. Those people are out there. And it's so there's something that he said that the Cross-Eyed Mary is, well, I'm going to quote him, is a song about another form of low life, but more humorous. It's about a schoolgirl prostitute, but not in such terms. She goes with dirty old men because she's doing them a favor, giving people what they want because it makes them happy. It's a fun kind of song. So, on his point of view, he was making fun of a dark kind of scenario, isn't it? It's
yeah. That's really interesting. The other thing I was going to say towards that, I mean, we should get onto the songs in a bit, but the other thing I was going to say about that is that isn't that another idea of people not conforming to societal formats? She should be with people her own age. She should be only friends with her classmates, but she's not. She's what, 12 years old? Is that what you said? And she's
I know it doesn't mention any age or anything. I don't think schoolgirl. So you imagine she could be anything from 12 to 15 or
hanging out with
it's
this old
shocking.
man.
Yeah, but it's shocking. You know, I mean, it's not. It's something that you wouldn't approach in lyrics, but as he says, he uses humor all the time.
I was just going to say that it's
make it lighter,
like tongue in cheek, like irony, like satire.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You can imagine a really dark kind of sitcom comedy show which just explores the life of a 15-year-old prostitute and a homeless man. That's a comedy show, right?
That's a comedy show, and it's if you do the right take on it,
Yeah.
like with all the social interactions, and you can make it sound funny. The interesting thing though is it just made me think about the theme of going to school, because he mentions this. So I said it's about it's about poverty, it's about religion, and it's about school, and all those kind of, well, basically this character is in school, the girl, and you have him going to school. In a couple of songs, it's Ian Anderson's, like, his own point of view of how school tried to make him follow a certain religion in certain terms, and he didn't quite understand it, and he didn't think they were right. He basically, no, you guys didn't get it. It's not, that's not how God talks to me. God doesn't say those things to me. Basically, is his approach. So basically, he's criticizing the way school would teach religion to young kids, and you think about Cross-Eyed Mary. She's the girl who didn't just follow the rules, and it's kind of sad, the whole thing. But it makes you think, like, if you try to keep people strict into those rules and they don't necessarily follow, and there's an element of tragedy to that it's not avoidable all the time, and there's nothing you can do about it.
I also feel like turning what you've said on its head, I also feel like there's an element of liberty there. That
there is,
thinking for themselves, doing what they want. Would any of us be happy if a 15-year-old relative of ours was doing prostitution? I think not. But that's,
or if anyone in our family was a homeless guy.
Yes, yeah.
So that's the thing about those characters. I think he mentions the discomfort of dealing with those people, right?
Yeah.
I think it's not meant to be cool. It's not meant for you to say, oh yeah, people should just go and do that. It's not what he's saying. It's like, it's not comfortable to even deal with those characters, but they exist.
Fascinating.
They exist, right? They are there.
Exactly. Right? And we said that about the Dire Straits with the Money for Nothing.
Yeah.
Is that Money for Nothing?
Yeah, Money for Nothing. So he's using, exactly. The characters are not cool.
No.
And if you want, they're there, they exist. And if you can't talk about them, does it make them disappear? So, I mean,
is this an anti-cancel culture album?
I don't know. Well, not really, because that kind of culture didn't exist at the time. Exactly. I think the 70s, people would interpret, even heavy use of drugs and promiscuous, like sex life and all this stuff. That wouldn't be. They would try to break the rules, and sometimes people go too far when they're breaking the rules, isn't it? And it's part of it. They could say whatever. So I think I'm glad that those dark themes that we sometimes don't want to talk about, I'm glad they exist in the form of music, which makes it lighter. I think, like, talking about this, it's harder than actually just listen to a song and imagine that those characters exist, and we don't necessarily have to understand who they are.
That's a good point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, right, let's get on to the songs then. All right, we said we go track by track because we've both got like stuff to say about all of them.
So let's do it.
But before we do the songs, just quickly, I've got another segment.
Yeah,
we're going to do a quiz. So I've got 4 questions for Felipe, just to see if it's just testing his Aqualung knowledge. Right, question 1. Which band were recording at Island Studios at the same time as Jethro Tull?
Led Zeppelin, and Zeppelin got the smallest room.
They did, yeah. And you bonus point, I'm sure you're going to get it. You know what album they were recording.
Oh, no.
Led Zeppelin.
Is that part of the quiz? Okay.
No. That's no problem. Question 2. What is the common link between the front cover art and the back cover art, but not the interior art of the vinyl? Do you understand the question?
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
So the front cover art and the back cover art, there's something that links them, but it doesn't share the inside of the vinyl art. Do you know?
No, I don't know.
So the original artwork for the front and back cover were both stolen. The original artwork, but the inside vinyl art wasn't stolen, and the producer, Terry Ellis, has it in his house. Yeah, I'm sure. You listen. You can Google it if you guys want. Listeners, have a Google, see what happened. But it is that they were pieces of art, and they were both nicked, which is just awesome.
Insane.
Um,
Insane.
Question three: Aqualung and Warchild are the only two Jethro Tull albums to do what?
Ooh, reached the top 10 in America and the UK. Is
No,
that
no, it's a little more technical. It's they were the only two Jethro Tull albums to be released in quadraphonic sound. Now, for
all
those
right?
listening, and this was quite big apparently, this was quite a bit of an innovation in the early 70s. Quadraphonic sound is equivalent to what we now call 4.0 sound. So if you've ever bought a speaker and it says, listen, set up your home theater in 4.0 Dolby sound. Well, that uses four audio channels in which the speakers are basically positioned in four corners of the room or of a
Yeah.
listening space. And it just basically, I think it's the pre-surround sound because you're
All
feeling like you're
right.
getting the sound
Yeah.
from all four corners of the room. And so this one and Warchild were the only two Jethro Tull albums to do that. And the final question, um, which song from the album, which song from this album was Jethro Tull's first song to chart in the US?
I'd say it's Aqualung.
No.
Wow. Got it
Uh,
wrong.
it's Hymn
Which one?
43.
Really?
Yeah, apparently so. I thought Aqualung would do it too, but
Which is
anyway,
a fantastic song as well. I used to
yeah,
play
yeah.
that with the Covers
Anyway, man,
band
no,
back
well
in the
done.
day.
1 out of 4, but I think they were hard questions, especially that
They
quadraphonic
they
sound
are,
one.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Just
anyway,
just
but well
one.
done.
That's fine, but good.
Let's let's
Some
crack
good
on and
pieces
let's
of
talk about.
information there.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, yeah, I do my research. Let's crack on and let's talk about the songs. So first off, Aqualung. Let's just say the title. You tell me what you have to say. I'll tell you what I have to say, and then we'll move on.
Well, I'm going to just mention that the whole thing is about obviously about this character we talked about. There's a really interesting verse, really interesting line that says something leg hurting bad as he bends to pick up a dog end. That for me sums up how terrible this guy's situation is,
Yeah.
and he's looking at little girls passing by. It's really disgusting at some
Do you
point,
know? Do you know what
but
a dog end is?
it's a real character. Hmm?
Do you know what a
Describe
dog
it
end is?
yourself, sir.
A dog end is the end of a cigarette that people haven't smoked.
Yeah,
And if you live in England,
yeah.
it's quite normal to see. I mean, I live where was it? I lived in London.
It's when you want to get you want to still want to have one more, like you want to smoke a little bit more, but you only find those,
Yeah, or other people's. That's what's
Yes,
disturbing.
yeah, I know, it's
Yeah, no,
disgusting. That's what
not
I'm saying.
telling
It's
you,
like
the others.
yeah,
For anyone who
it's
doesn't know, it's just the end of someone else's cigarette that you find on the
yeah.
floor, and you light the last couple of millimeters of tobacco just to get a toke in. Tragic.
That again, that's a lot. That's loads of these like expressions in the album. When I first read the lyrics years and years ago, I had to look out for the information. Like, what does that mean? Because it's like
Right.
it's not under a foreign point of view. It's not basic standard English. There's
Yeah.
loads of expressions, loads of idioms in there throughout the whole album, and it's really interesting for whoever is into. If you're listening to this and English, just like me, English is not your first language, just dig deep into the lyrics of this album. You're going to learn a lot. Anyway, but I think the story is amazing. The way he describes this guy's pain, but under his point of view, as he said, he wasn't a homeless guy at any point in his life, so he doesn't know how it feels like, but he can get a certain sense of how is it. And and I think the instrumentation is just brilliant. The main riff and the spaces between the riff and the way the drums interact with the riff, and the main drum groove in the song, it's not like a classic kick, hi-hat, and snare. It's all based on the low tones, and it's like really, really dark and heavy. I love it. It's like that.
Yeah.
And obviously you have that massive contrast on the actual chorus of the song is just guitar, acoustic guitar and vocals. Then you see how beautiful the songwriting is, even without the main riff. And I'll tell you this, I've seen them live years ago in Brazil.
Oh wow.
And yeah, to tell you how powerful the songwriting is, I'll tell you two things about that gig. He couldn't play his flute because I think he had some issues. I don't know. He didn't play the flute on that tour, and he had someone playing violin to do some of the flute lines, but not all of them, and not exactly like them.
Yeah.
Even without the flute, Jethro Tull is still a fantastic live band, and they played, believe me or not, Aqualung without the main riff.
Interesting.
They wanted to prove a point. Like, this is a great song. Regardless, you might think it's about the guitar, you might think it's about the band, but he was like, listen, the lyrics are beautiful, the melody. They played bits and pieces of the riff without never finishing the riff.
That's very cool.
And I was like, I was in such agony, like, please play the riff. But what a song, anyway. Nonetheless, what a song.
My thoughts on Aqualung, I mean, the riff itself, it really reminded me of Cream. Had this old kind of blues, sort of heavy, hard rock, dissonant line. Acoustic breaks were beautiful in it. I thought the contrast between his beautifully smooth vocals and the dissonant kind of hard rock riff really worked together. And the only other thing I have is his voice really reminded me of Greg Lake. And I think, like I said, the contrast between those heavy, dissonant, bluesy riffs and his Greg Lake voice worked so nicely together.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's it for Aqualung. Track 2, Cross-Eyed Mary.
So we said a lot about the song. I'm gonna add something here. I'm gonna. There's a line in the song I think is fucking beautiful. She's the Robin Hood of Highgate. Helps the poor man get along.
Robin Hood of Highgate.
So it's just the take on it. It's like it should be a sad, tragic, disgusting situation, but it's like.
But he keeps the humor there.
He keeps the humor. It's other way, and he sings in a serious way. It makes you think.
Is that
so I'm going to.
I was going to say, is that not so British? Just like taking a serious.
Exactly. If you don't share that sense of humor, I wonder how, like, the American audiences interpret everything he's had in the album.
That's why only Hymn 43 got into the charts.
Exactly. Maybe that's right. Maybe that's. It's funny.
Sorry, you had a question. You said.
No, yeah, because you know which heavy metal band recorded that song.
I do. Yes, I'll put it in the playlist. So yeah, Iron Maiden did it, didn't they?
What a great version. I like it.
We'll put all these in the playlist, guys. We'll put the whole album, and then I'm going to mention some songs that I think sound like the others, and we're going to put this Iron Maiden one in there as well, as usual, and it'll be at the bottom of the show notes. Did you have more to say about Mary?
No, I think we can move on. Next song.
No, I will say some stuff about Cross-Eyed Mary. Again, I'm talking very musically about it.
Yeah.
I thought the flute introduction was very cool. It was almost tribalistic. I almost heard this tribal kind of music at the start. I thought the intro and the outro, the first 30 seconds and the last 20 seconds, I can't even describe why I feel this way, but it felt like film music. It felt like I should be seeing something visual on a screen whilst the intro and outro were happening. I thought the hard rock guitar and bass tones during the verses were really cool, contrasting that with a funky kind of chorus. Somewhere in the song, there's the same chord progression as Good Times, Bad Times by Led Zeppelin.
All right.
Done and bad times, I had my share. Then it goes up a tone. Then a woman left home for another man. That's somewhere in the song. The flute solo was fantastic, and I found it really progressive because you've got these classical elements in rock. So he takes these classical kind of flute melodies and he puts it in a rock setting, just like Emerson, Lake and Palmer did. You got the distorted keyboards that reminded me a lot of Space Trucking by Deep Purple. And yeah, the only other point I had was about the lyrics, but we've covered that. So yeah, no, that's a great track, Cross-Eyed Mary. I thought that was really
good. It is.
Track 3, amazing. Cheap Day Return.
Do you know what the song is all about?
I don't know.
Yeah. So Ian Anderson was returning to London from the north. I don't know where in the north. But then he visited his dad in the hospital. And he was wondering if the nurses were treating his dad or treating himself as well in a good way because he's famous. So there's something about taking his autograph, the lyrics, and they were really kind to him. But he was like, is it that because I'm famous and they want to be nice to me, are they treating my dad
in the same way.
nicely and in the same way, or in the way he deserves. So it's a sad song because he doesn't know what's going on with his dad, and he doesn't know if he's having a good time there or not. And it's so
That's really funny because I feel like
it's a short song.
yeah, well, I feel like it has quite an uplifting vibe to it. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
it reminds me of a song called "The Wind" by Cat Stevens, almost a bit like I don't know, you say "Bron Yiror" by Led Zeppelin and "Going to California." Those kind of short, sweet acoustic songs, very folky, short, sweet, and acoustic. I thought it was a really lovely song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's quite a few songs in the album that are shorter than 2 minutes, in
Yes.
contrast to songs that are 6-7 minutes long. So
I mean, I've addressed that in my
yeah.
episode monologue.
All right.
Track 4, Mother Goose. Now, this one I thought was really good. I really enjoyed this one. It was one of the earliest songs written for the album, actually. And I feel that it has this really lovely country folky vibe about it. I mean, one of the notes I've written down is that it reminded me of "Friend of the Devil" by Grateful Dead. I thought it had a lovely use of dynamics. This is what Ian Anderson had to say about the song, actually. He said, "I tend to be more in social realism in terms of subject matter, but I do stretch to the more whimsical, surreal songs like Mother Goose." And Anderson has also called the song a surrealistic pastiche with summary motives. And I think that word, summary, is lovely. Not summary as in let's summarize, like summer. And it does have a summery vibe about it, doesn't it? It's just nice. It's light. You can imagine listening to it with the sun out and the wind blowing through, an English countryside.
And it's interesting then again because I can see the characters. I can see, well, in this case, maybe him in Piccadilly Circus, right? And there's
Do you know what the lyrics are about? Do you want to tell what's the part about this?
I don't know, but I have one part. I just want to quote one part. I don't really know what he's talking about because there's loads of stuff in there. But I love this part of the song that he says, "And a foreign student said to me, 'Was it really true? There are elephants, lions too, in Piccadilly Circus.'"
Wow.
So you can see that happening. You can see the student, like someone who's never been to London, coming to him like, "Is it a real circus? Are we going to see elephants and lions in it?"
I've just got goosebumps from hearing that, man, because it's that really is the marvel of London. Is having been born there and lived there for a few years, you living there, or you've lived there for the last however many years as well. Yeah. There is this sort of this mythicness around London, isn't there? That, oh my God, does London really have this? Is it really the city that never sleeps? And just you saying that, I can just imagine a foreign, it's giving me goosebumps just thinking that someone would talk about my hometown like that and say that.
Yeah, can I say it?
Is it true? Are there elephants? Are there lions too?
It's a circus, right?
Yeah. And that's where the comedy comes in as well.
Yeah.
How he's done that.
Exactly.
He's married up a very serious and emotional, for me, point about how fantastic London is to the outside world, mixing with the fact that he's joking because it's a circus.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me feel like he's kind of telling people that London is not what you think it is, and nothing is exactly what you expect, but it can be even better. You never know.
That's a fantastic point, man. That's a fantastic point.
Yeah. It's
really
quite, because you hear so much about those places when you go there. It's not really what you expect, but
and not necessarily.
In my opinion, it's better.
Exactly.
My opinion is
exactly.
better. It's just different. Yeah, and are we moving on to the next?
Yeah. So track 5 is called "Wandering Aloud." I tell you, this one really reminded me. It had a really sort of James Taylor vibe about it, kind of like the Cheap Day Return, just this acoustic sort of song with some nice melodies. I thought one thing that stood out about this was the stunning orchestration. I mean, the classical music that you're hearing, the string melodies that accompany the guitar. It, as you and me both know, because we've studied orchestration and arrangement to degree level at university, it's hard. It's hard to make lots of songs, lots of instruments within an orchestra, violins, trumpets, flutes, percussion, oboes, clarinets, to make them all sound so good and work with each other is a really hard task. And I think that, again, I don't really know if anyone did this for him or if he did this, but whoever did it, it is phenomenal. The orchestration sounds beautiful.
It is beautiful, and it's basically strings, isn't it? And I found a video of him playing the song with maybe a strings quartet, or
Oh,
maybe a few more musicians.
Can you send it to me and
I'll
we'll put it in
send
the
you,
show
and
notes?
it's just beautiful when they actually play
Fantastic.
the band and the strings, and it's just short of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a minute and 53, if I'm not wrong, and you don't need anything more. You
No,
don't need it to be longer. He tells
no.
the story. He ends the song, done, and it's about like a day, a normal day, an ordinary day in a couple's life, and they thinking about, when we get older, is this still going to be that good? Whatever. And I love the last line of the song, and it's only the giving that makes you what you are. And it's just so poetic and so beautiful. And that's love, right? You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
you want to describe what love is that you actually concerned about giving, and
Yeah.
it's just that. I'll tell you this. This is my absolute favorite song in the whole album, and
Really?
yes,
Wow.
I would say of the whole band's discography, for a simple reason. It's what makes us enjoy music, isn't it? It's when you can't stop listening to a song. Every single time in my life I've listened to that song, I had to repeat it.
Really?
Tell you that. It's like
You
I
don't have
said,
enough of it. You want more.
although those 2 minutes are exactly what the song needs, but I want to listen to it again.
Yeah.
2 minutes is not enough for me. I want to listen to it again and again.
That's lovely,
Beautiful,
man. That's
beautiful
nice.
song.
Yeah,
Beautiful
I'm
song.
glad you feel that way. That is a lovely song. The next song is called "Up to Me." This is track 6. I didn't really have many notes on this. I was just saying that I thought the riff was very progressive sounding. That's the flute riff. That's all I really had on it. What do you have to say?
I think again the most interesting thing about he uses the language again in a beautiful way. With "up to me" in many different meanings of the expression "up to me." It's really cool, but it's again, you have mainly acoustic guitar. There's percussion instead of drums, which is like, it's not that rock and roll when you think about it, but it is. Instead of a whole drum kit, it's more percussion, and the flute playing the main riff. I think that's a really bold decision to make. It's like, I know he can play the flute really well, but to be a band leader and say, look, we have this amazing riff and it's going to be played by the flute, not the. Actually, can we do a segment on this?
Yeah, go on, introduce it.
So, how rock and roll is that? Play the main riff of a rock song with a flute instead of a guitar.
Okay.
Now you give me the numbers.
Coming. Oh wow. I mean, I think you have to look at what it did for prog rock, because I know prog rock. When we associate bands like ELP, it was the late '60s that they kind of all got going. So prog rock had it was still in its prime, I think, at this point, but what made prog different was taking other elements of music, like the classical stuff, and putting it into a hard rock setting, essentially. So, do you know what? I think this has to be high scoring. I'm going to give it a 92, because he's shaped. I don't want to say he's shaped a genre, but he's made a huge statement as to what this particular genre can be. Right, what can progressive rock be? Right, well, as long as the instrumentation is roughly the same, drums, bass, and a rhythm guitar, you can put whatever you want on top of it. Whether it was Keith Emerson's piano or Ian Anderson's flute, you can do what you want.
But in terms of being rock and roll, for me, it's like, imagine you've written that riff. Maybe even if you wrote the riff with the flute, it's like, this is a riff. And it could be hard, and could be a hard rock, distorted guitar riff in your face. And I said, nah, just play with the flute.
But it still works.
That's rock and roll. But that's rock and roll. It's like, yeah,
I think
the flute is the lead instrument in a rock band. It's just like, almost like Palmer
Yeah.
not having a guitar player. It's like
Mm,
it's rock and roll. But
yeah.
in this case, I think it's even more shocking that the fact you have a great guitar player behind you and say, "Nah, not going to use you.
That's a good
It's
point.
gonna be
Yeah.
it's gonna be the flute
Yeah,
instead."
I think 92 is a very good score then.
Yeah, yeah,
So
right.
next track is my. Did you have anything more to say about?
No, no, just
No.
move on.
Right. Well, next track, track 7. Actually, I think is my favorite from the album, and it's called "My God." And to
Right.
completely use the pun, my God, is it a good song? I've got lots of points on this. I'll just go through them. I thought the flute counter melody to the vocals. So the vocals doing one melody, and that's what a counter melody is for anyone who
Yeah.
doesn't know. Is that whilst the vocals doing one melody, the flute is doing another melody that's different, but it still works. I thought it was very proggy. The fiddle or the fiddle slash violin that came in, very gypsy jazz, very gypsy jazz.
Interesting point there.
I put a YouTube link in the show notes of one of my favourite gypsy jazz guy, a guy called Borelli Legren, and he often plays with a fiddle player. And I'll just find one little short song with the fiddle in, and you hear how it compares. I thought the riff was really heavy. I thought the verse riff was cool and really dissonant. Heavy metal riff because you've got heavy guitar, it's distorted, it's louder than the vocals, which I thought was important, and it's playing quite dissonant. I loved his flute solo because one element I loved of it is that you can hear him breathing whilst he's doing it.
Yeah.
And you know, in modern times, they might get rid of the breathing, but he's going, and then the part, he goes,
Yeah.
he does this part, he goes, yeah, it's just like, this is him scatting, with the flute.
Rock and roll. It's rock and roll.
Now, there's
Why not?
there's two songs that I've sort of compared this. One song came after this song, one song came before. The flute solo in the middle on its own reminded me a bit of Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin, where the song just stops and Jimmy Page does his solo. Now, the middle section with the choir, I just thought that was completely Bohemian Rhapsody.
And that's very unexpected.
And it's before Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, right,
Bohemian Rhapsody is 1975, and we all thought, oh my God, look what he's done with the choir. He's done all this vocal layering, and you get this, that, and the other, and then it comes in for a heavy riff at the end. Well, we all thought that was the first time anyone had done something like that, but yet here, we got a flute solo, followed by an arranged choir, and then with multi-layered flutes coming in as well as vocals, and then after that section, it goes into a heavy rock riff afterwards, just like Bohemian Rhapsody. So I don't know, I have to put it out there. Queen, did you listen to My God before you wrote Bohemian Rhapsody?
Maybe they did. I know everyone was listening to them at the time. So
Yeah.
I think, there's a clear context. It's kind of church choir, isn't it? It's not. It's very kind of religious
choral,
motifs. Yeah, really interesting.
And sorry, can we just talk about the title as well? My God.
Yeah.
Because that's so many. Look how I used that pun a minute ago. I said, my God, is it a good song? But this could also be, I'm talking about my God.
And it is. He's making a point about, here's one quote from Ian Harrison. Isn't a song against God or against the idea of God, but it's against God's and the hypocritical church of the establishment. It's a criticism of the God they choose to worship.
Wow.
It's when you think about it, it's the fact that he's pointing out the fact that some religions, or some, I wouldn't say not every time the religion itself, but some people who are part of their religion, some priests and some, they literally shape God into something that suits them, into something that's going to serve their purposes. And what Ian Anderson's basically saying, look, when I talk to God, it's not like that.
Yeah.
It's not the way he talks to me. So that's not my God. Your God, something else.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about that song? I love that one.
No, yeah, that's it. I mean, if we move on into the next song, you see the religious theme still there.
Okay, well, you take us into it. Track 8 is Hymn 43. Why don't you take us?
Well, it's for me, it's straight to the point, heavy, aggressive vocals.
Yeah.
And the religious topic is there again. There's a really cool part of the song where he says, if Jesus saves, well, he'd better save himself from the gory glory seekers who use his name in death. Oh, wow. Jesus, save me.
Wow.
So again, it's not it's actually, it's not criticizing Jesus. It's like, okay, Jesus is cool, but look at what people have done with what he tried to teach us, and it's really, really cool. It's a really cool approach. I like it.
That is, yeah. The only thing I had to say about the album, again, I talked about the musical aspects of it, was I thought it was a really kind of Zeppelin-y riff, very bluesy, syncopated rhythmic hits as well throughout the song are really nice. One thing that I want to draw your attention to that I found really interesting is it's really weird because it doesn't happen before this song, but it happens on the last 4 songs. It happens in 3 of them. And that is the guitar playing dead notes in a rhythmic way. So it happens, I don't know, I'll touch on it after, but it happens in this song as well. It's the guitar, he's not playing any notes. He's, do you know, let me show you quickly. So this is a mandolin, it's not a guitar. I'm not a giant. But if you've got a note like that, and this is a cheap mandolin, so don't worry about the sound. That's a note, or this is a dead note. And throughout the song you hear, and it's in tracks 8, 9, and 11. That throughout the song you just hear, and it's purely rhythmic on a melodic instrument, which is interesting. But we'll come.
It's an interesting. I'll say that they use that resource a lot over the album, don't they? And it's a percussive approach of a string instrument.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Track 9, Slipstream, another one of those short acoustic songs, isn't it?
It's a folk song again.
Yeah,
it's folk. That's not rock. It's folk. And again, it shows the power of the songwriting over everything else.
And again, just like I want to say with, what was it, Wandering Aloud, the orchestration, classical guitar playing. I mean, if you listen to something like, there's a difference between acoustic guitar playing and classical guitar. I'll put a track on the playlist by John Williams, the famous John Williams, who wrote all the Star Wars and the Harry Potter music. He plays classical guitar. And the difference between classical guitar and acoustic is, with classical guitar, you're often playing the melody at the same time as the chords. So when I put this, I'll put a song in the playlist and I'll do a video so you can watch John Williams. Classical guitar players and their hands, I mean, I know you can't see what Felipe can, but you lot can't see what I'm doing. The hands are so stretched because you've got to play a melody with the top fingers whilst keeping the bass note in your bottom fingers. So I just thought this was a fantastic display of the guitar player's talent. Would it be Ian Anderson playing this?
The acoustic guitar, I would say so.
Yeah, so you're right. Acoustic guitars, Ian Anderson. Martin Barr is the electric guitar. But yeah, just listen out. Watch that John Williams video and then come and listen to this. And it's just so much talent. I mean, I talked about the orchestration with the strings and the flutes, but now we're hearing classical guitar as well. It's just unreal composition.
Well, and it's again short.
Yeah. Another short one. Now we're into the penultimate track of the album, which is Locomotive Breath. I thought this is a really good track as well. Very riff heavy. You got a classical piano at the start, which reminded me of Queen from the same album, A Night at the Opera. The first track of Night at the Opera is Death on Two Legs, and it has this fantastically talented piano intro that Freddie Mercury plays, and I found the same kind of thing here. The constant dead note rhythm. So what I just did on the mandolin, that rhythm being played behind the track really reminded me of Pigs by Pink Floyd.
There you go.
The cowbell.
Interesting.
The cowbell. Dun,
Yeah.
da, da, dun.
You have the cowbell there.
Da, 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 and the cowbell just constantly going through. This is what the guitar sounded like to me. And again, this is 8 years before Animals came out. I'm not.
And again, here's an interesting thing. Queen and Pink Floyd, they did loads of overdubs. It's like recording different layers of instrument and not necessarily playing them together. You go there and record one instrument and another one and another one. That's why you have bands with one guitar player and you have 4 or 5 guitar tracks in a song. That's a very common resource. But up to that time, like 1971, I reckon most things were recorded with the whole band live in studio just to fill overdubs. Interesting story about this song is it was made on the spot, so he had some ideas, but it wasn't clear, and he had no idea. Yeah, he had no idea how the song would sound as a final product. but he had some things in his mind, and he said he was struggling to deliver that information to the bandmates, so his bandmates. So he was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to start recording. He said there was no click tracks at the time where you record things to a metronome track, like a click, and you just play your instrument on top of it, and everyone else can play on top of it, and it's going to sound in sync because you have the metronome as a reference. So what he did was he recorded the bass drum, the kick drum, and the hi-hat to start with. He played that for about 4 minutes. So that's it. Boom, boom. That's the thing. So it's like it was actually 4 on the floor, which means the bass drum is doing boom, 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 playing all 4 beats of the bar. And the hi-hat, which I believe he plays with sticks, plays on beats 2 and 4. So boom, boom. He recorded that all the way, 4 minutes. And then he recorded acoustic guitars and some electric guitars and some vocals. Again, that song could work just fine with just Ian Anderson. And then obviously, so the drummer had some drums to record on top of it. So like, okay, there's already some drum work in there. So he recorded toms on top of those kicks and hi-hats. And then the guitar solo, or all the lead guitar parts came, and piano and everything else. So no one knew exactly how the song would end. So what's the final product? So really cool way of writing a song with, you got to think about the resources of that time. Nowadays, you can sample everything and do everything on your laptop and try, this is going to sound good. But at the time, you just had to go for it. And you mind you are wasting tape. So recording on tape, you waste that. That's precious. That's worth a lot of money, and you just have to do your best.
It's brilliant.
Yes, exactly. Really, really cool stuff. What a song!
Now, finally,
I have one note about this song as well. He says the lyrics, which I had no idea they were about this. Quote, about the issues of overcrowding, the rather claustrophobic feel of a lot of people in a limited space.
And that explains the title as well.
Yeah.
Locomotive train, but you're on the train, the locomotive breath. So I imagine he's talking about people being up close, breathing in your face on the train.
Exactly.
Again, a witty, satirical, humorous title.
Amazing. You take this like a simple thing of an everyday routine, which is getting on a train or whatever, and it's an overcrowded places. Everyone goes through that kind of stuff. And he turns that into poetry and rock and roll.
Yeah, that's brilliant, brilliant stuff. Now, the final track of the album is a track called Wind Up. I thought this was a really, really nice track because there were so many different elements of stuff I was hearing. I mean, we've gone through and we've spoken about classical music in these songs, folk music in these songs, hard rock in this song. I felt like this was an encapsulation of everything we'd heard. I mean, you got the very quiet acoustic intro. Then the rest of the song's kind of riff heavy. The verse, it reminded me of like an Elton John chord progression. The Elton John song "Your Song," I'll put that in the playlist. Just the way the chords moved. Elton John was a fantastic piano player who really knew how to move from, which chord he should go to afterwards, and I really heard that here. You've got the dueling twin lead guitars that were doing their bit. I think that's towards the end of the song or in the solo or something. Again, who was doing that at this time? Thin Lizzy and the heavy metal, as you heard from last week's episode. And again, another part of this song is the rhythmic dead notes that go on. You've got the bluesy guitar riffs for the main verse. I just thought this song was just a fantastic amalgamation of everything we'd heard from the first 10 songs, all the best parts, all the main themes from each song put together into one song that actually ends the album beautifully.
Yeah, what a way to end an album, isn't it?
Yeah.
With something that sums up the whole album. Again, I love the lyrics, and back to the theme of God, isn't it? I love this part when he says, "And I asked this God a question, and by way of firm reply, he said, I'm not the kind who have to wind up on Sundays." You tell me, what do you think?
That last part again?
I'm not the kind you have to wind up on Sundays. It's
right.
Yeah,
How do you interpret that?
Again, what I see here is God saying to him, "I'm not that God that your school teacher. Yeah, I'm not that one."
Fantastic, man. This is just, I mean, I haven't paid attention to, I mean, I hear the lyrics, obviously, and I take them in,
Yeah.
but I love how you do this, man. I love this dynamic that we've got on the show now, where quite often I address the musical topics and you talk about the lyrics, depending on which albums we do, obviously. But the fact that you pointed this out to me, that this album is just lyrically, obviously, other little bits here and there, but forget the stuff about Aqualung and the schoolgirl, but a huge theme throughout this album is how excuse me, is how Ian Anderson views religion and God. And I mean, rock and roll is musical freedom. We say it every week. And this
Yes.
is his way of saying, well, do you know what? You do you. You look after you worship your God you worship your God your way. You go to church when you want, but this is what I think about it. And man, like you said earlier about how it makes us uncomfortable talking about certain things in a discussion, but then when it comes to music, we can address them. I think this is another fantastic example that he is saying, well, this is how I view my God, and I'm going to tell you through music.
Yeah. Wow. For me, there's a strong element of respect in there, in the sense like, do you know what? I get you. I understand. That's where
Yeah.
you're coming from. But you know what? I'm not like you,
Yeah.
and I can see who you are, but you can't see who I am.
Mm.
And it's interesting, isn't it?
That's great. Yeah.
And
Good point.
it's a very personal take on everything. And he's not claiming, that's what I love about his lyrics, which I only understand right now. He's not claiming to know the truth. To
Yeah.
get
He's
it.
just
It's not
giving
like
his
it's not saying
interpretation.
it's not saying, yeah, my God is better than yours, or it's like
Yeah.
this is how I see it. This is how he's actually saying he talks to God. So that you should get it. It's like it's
Yeah.
not like, but it's that's what I heard from him. It's not what you got from yours, and it's
Yeah.
not. It's really interesting, and he's kind of capable of understanding to a certain level, without claiming to be part of that thing, but he's capable of understanding his God, someone else's God,
Yeah.
and the schoolgirl prostitute and the old homeless guy, and he understands them.
Because everyone in life, you can only. There's a fantastic. Have you ever read the book To Kill a Mockingbird? It's an American classic.
No, I don't know that.
No.
Oh no, actually, no. Wait a minute. Yeah, I watched the movie.
Yes. Oh man, the movie's fantastic, but you got to do the book as well. The book is
Yeah.
just. It's probably my favorite book. And there's a quote in there which says that you can't understand. I'm going to get it wrong, so I'll just say what the general means is you can't understand something about you can't understand a day in a man's life until you walk a day in his shoes.
Yeah.
And that's just saying that you cannot actually judge anyone, and you cannot claim to know how someone is feeling or thinking without knowing what it is like to be them. And I think sort of what the quote I just said mixed with what you've said is a fantastic interpretation of Ian Anderson's lyrics and what he's feeling. He's like,
and it's
gone.
Interesting that you mentioned this classic book, and it makes you think, this is literature, isn't it? This whole album, this English literature it's poetry at its best, in my opinion.
Do you know what?
It's really good poetry.
Yeah, it's stunning. I haven't, of all the albums we've done, this hasn't been. I have to say, I love it. It's a brilliant album. But of the albums that I'd never heard before and got into because we've done an episode on it, I wouldn't say this is my favorite. I liked Electric Ladyland. I thought that was really good. There's a few others we've done, but this has been. I don't know what to say. I feel like several times this episode, what we've done now, I have got goosebumps from stuff you've said about Ian Anderson's lyrics, from some of the musical elements we've discussed. I'm in awe of this album, of this songwriting, and I will now go and listen to more Jethro Tull, and I will listen to this album again because it's bloody brilliant.
I'm thinking about listening to it again right now.
Yeah, why not? Fantastic. Right, so to sort of end the episode, what we'll do is just tell you a little bit about the critical reception it got, because at the time it wasn't actually that. I mean, it was good, but it wasn't incredibly well received. I'll just throw a few lines out there for you. Rolling Stone said it's a fine musicianship and it was a serious and intelligent album. Sounds magazine said the taste and variety made it the band's finest work. The Village Voice called it the 22nd best album of 1971. All Music said it's a bold statement and extremely profound. Pop Matters said that it's a cornerstone of the prog rock canon, but it did and does exist wholly on its own terms as a great rock album. I'm mentioning Steve Harris because obviously Iron Maiden covered Cross-Eyed Mary.
Yeah.
Steve Harris said it's a classic album, fantastic playing and fantastic attitude and vibe. And in terms of, where it stands today, Classic Rock have called it the 30th best rock album. Rolling Stone have it as number 337 in their 500 greatest albums of all time. In terms of the best-selling albums of the 70s, it was the 90th. So of the whole 70s, It was the 90th best-selling album. Prog call it the 43rd best prog album of all time. And I mean, it's hard to disagree with any of those comments because it is just a bloody great album. To end the show, Felipe, do you want to tell us your thoughts on the album before I do my little end-of-episode monologue?
What I think, what I have to say is the I think there is no compromise at any point in the album. That's how I see Ian Anderson's approach to the album. There's no compromise. Everything he wanted to do is there. The folk acoustic guitars, the flute taking the lead, and as I said to you, the contrast between folk and heavy rock is a strong element in the album.
Yeah.
But I believe the fact that it's a one man's idea, start to finish, is what amazes me the most.
And
it's
how good the lyrics are.
Exactly. It's like you're jumping into Ian Anderson's brain and getting a taste of how he sees the world. And again, a great statement on poverty, religion, and
school.
And school.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll tell you my thoughts on the album with my usual. Maybe we should turn this into a segment. Laz's monologue.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. It's a segment.
Here, what are we going to call it? Laz's monologue. Laz's.
Yes.
Fine. Here is Laz's monologue. Going to need some new music for this. Right, well, with Aqualung, you've got a fantastic blend of genres that are executed across sort of many differing song styles, and that, for me, is what makes it prog. And what I mean by that is that you have long 6 to 7 minute songs, and you've got short 1.5 to 2 minute acoustic songs, but they all display the same tendencies and characteristics. Now, what I mean by those characteristics, classical orchestration and sort of, arrangement, progressive rock melodies and phrasing, hard rock / heavy metal riffs, blues structures, and in elements and in certain places, blues chord progressions, twin lead rhythm guitars, and rhythmic phrasing coming from places other than drums. This all leads to an entirely consistent and coherent album with many differing song styles, but you know that it all comes from the same band, the same songwriter, and the same album. And it also, a little side note here, is that it also astonished me that it can sound so proggy without relying so heavily on keyboards. You think what we did with Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and yes, keyboards and synths are such a heavy part of prog rock, especially in the late 60s going to the 70s. And for this album to not have that much of an emphasis using keyboards, but still sound like a prog rock record, is a remarkable testament to the songwriting and compositional talent of Ian Anderson. And whilst I haven't studied the lyrics or taken the time to sort of read the story the way you have, Felipe, the whole thing feels very stage show / musical theatre-y to me. The short songs are like the little bits where the narrator is telling a story before the longer song comes that tells you about a much bigger picture. And it kind of, like I said, the short songs prepare you for the next full-length song. And just to sum it up, I think it is a songwriting and compositional masterpiece. It is just phenomenal. I really enjoyed listening and sort of dissecting this album.
I think I'd say that no one could have said it better. I mean,
Thank you.
amazing. If you don't mind, I have a couple of things to say based on some of the stuff I've written for. I think it stands out in a very diverse discography, and that's really hard because their albums
That's
sound
a good point.
Nothing alike.
That's a great point. When you have albums that each sound different, to make one of those different albums stand out is a huge. It's a job well done.
Exactly, by not being conventional at all, and they managed to break from the blues roots into something more unique. You can't hear the blues in this album as much as you can hear on the first ones, which is something they were really trying to do anyway. So they achieved that. And for Ian Anderson, that wasn't their best album. And do you know how he describes it? I can picture him with a cup of tea saying that.
Okay,
it's a good record with a bunch of good songs on it. Just that.
Fucking hell, Ian. Come on, man. Give yourself some credit. I mean, it's a brilliant album. God. Okay, well, listen, that's the modesty and humbleness of a songwriter, isn't it?
Yeah. Amazing.
Anyway. Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us for another episode. We hope you've enjoyed this. I mean, honestly, man, I know we always talk a little bit about the episode after we finish, but I'll tell you now, this has been one of my favourite episodes to do. I've loved how you've really analysed the lyrics and what he's trying to say, and I've sort of brought my musical... what am I trying to say? I've looked more into the musical side of it, and when we blend those two together, I feel like we really, guys, listeners. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. This is a bloody good podcast. We're doing,
isn't it?
This episode. I think we have completely dissected this album within about an hour. But yeah, anyway. So all jokes aside,
it's a good episode with a bunch of cool ideas in it. No more than that.
And with that, we're going to leave it there. As usual, guys, I haven't done this for actually a few episodes now, so I'm going to do this. Find us on these social media pages, please, guys. Give us likes, subscribe, please, because every like, every comment, every share, gets us out into the world and it gets us to more people. If you're using the Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please go and give us a rating. All you got to do is slide down to the bottom of the show note, hit 5 stars if you think that's what we're good enough for. And if you want, write a little review, just give us a paragraph, because what this does is every review we get, it boosts us up the chart. Someone searches rock and roll, we get shown higher up. Someone searches music history, it gets shown higher up. Someone Googles Jethro Tull podcast, we will be higher up if you rate our podcast. So we'd really appreciate that. Join us on our social media pages. We have discussions about once a week. We do the posts, we do some stories. So please go over, get involved to us. I'm not going to ask Felipe where you can find us this week because I've just told you. But the normal answer is the internet.
We're on the internet everywhere. And please, if you can be bothered to download a few episodes, just to, why not? Download a few episodes.
Yeah, get our numbers up. Yeah, thank you very much. Anyway, right. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks for being with us, and keep on rocking, everyone.
And as usual, take care and long live rock and roll.